Ah, elves, nature's way of telling us to love her more. Jokes aside though, while elves are extremely often, especially in anime and manga, subject of trafficking and forced nocturnal servitude, which is, given the elves' general strength and self-respect, way more than just a bit unrealistic. Most likely elves would be in almost all settings, and by almost all measures, extremely powerful to an almost supernatural degree. But before we start with any of this, let me quickly mention that this video has a full-length companion video about Frieren the Slayer, and why her strength and her general behavior, minus getting eaten by mimics all the time, really makes sense. It's linked down in the video description, so please check it out. But now, why would elves be naturally extremely powerful? Well, they are oftentimes depicted as being naturally stronger and just superior on basically anything and any measurement. For example, they are ageless and immune to disease in Lord of the Rings, immune to disease and nearly ageless in Warhammer and Warhammer 40k, and in general, they live extremely long. Now, oftentimes this is overlooked, but immunity to disease is something that is overpowered on its very own. A society immune to plagues and sicknesses is not only able to not lose a third of its population if another plague or so hits, but think of the implications of being sick, what it means to be sick. You can't go to work. On the contrary, somebody needs to work with you and your illness. You need medication and care. And the medication needs to be crafted and prepared. You need a place to sleep and rest. And all of this takes additional labor, so that you might just survive. And of course, depending on the society, maybe you just have infected everybody else around you, and then you still die. So now not only all of the treatment has been wasted, but now more people are even sicker and need treatment of their own. And this is very, very bad for society, as you can imagine. And if you don't become sick, not only won't you miss a single day of work, yay, but the entire industry needed to treat you isn't necessary anymore. On the contrary, since you are now immune to disease, and since you live for centuries, if not millennia, you could study medicine of other species that actually can get sick and treat them without any risk to yourself or your family once you come home from treating another plague outbreak or some pestilence in a human settlement. This fact alone makes elven society far more productive and stable than any non-elf society. Not to mention that their armies would also not suffer from attrition from plagues and other disease, which was a significant factor back in antiquity and medieval times. But again, this is just the lesser aspect of elf biology that is often overlooked. Their magic aptitude would make them, however, way more overpowered than you think. I mean, just think about how long a human mage, after his education, can serve, use magic, and improve upon it until he dies. And thus all of his education was for naught. Perhaps 40 or even 50 years, if he's lucky? But an elf who can become 500 or 5,000 years old would not only make much better use of the resources invested into her training and her education, but also could improve upon it and teach it for far, far longer. A single elf could reach its teenage years and be already a better healer, combat mage, divinator, and summoner than the best human magic casters combined, simply because he or she has already a couple hundred years under her belt. And then there's their natural grace and elegance, with which they move and conduct any business. Basically, they are faster and more precise, have better eyesight and ears, and far faster reflexes than us pure humans. Us monkeys, as the Eldari say. They can properly dodge or even catch arrows mid-air, hit their mark repeatedly from many hundreds of meters away while running or sprinting, and would be able to almost instantly kill any human knight in combat, simply because they have practiced their moves for so very long, and simply because they have seen so many fights, that they instantly recognize from the stance and the weapon and the general demeanor of the knight how he will swing his sword the next 4 or 5 times, how to dodge all of these swings, which actions he would take when you dodge or parry him this or that way, and so on and so forth, all while positioning yourself just at the right distance, so that you can simply stab the eyeball of the knight through his tiny opening in the visor with your elven rapier within a millisecond's notice. So elves, given all of these natural gifts of speed, agility, of magic, of their long lifespan and immunity to disease, would be already overpowered. And then you finally have to consider another power that they have: beauty. It is a simple fact, even if some of you don't like this fact, that we assume that beautiful people have better character, are smarter, are better leaders, are simply more capable and more trustworthy, all because they look a certain way. And now imagine how elves with their unearthly beauty and nearly eternal youth would be treated. They would be seen as, at least from the human point of view, as incredibly trustworthy and nice and valuable people. So even in this regard, mankind would more or less aspire to be more like elves, rather than resenting them. So given all of this, elves would in almost any setting end up as way more powerful and just flat out better than humanity. And this likely by a huge margin. And I haven't even talked about other benefits of their long lifespan, like long-term planning, or runaway technological innovations, or the economic power that they would develop. So if anything, I probably should talk about how to actually nerf, or at least balance elves, without making them just fewer numbers, which honestly would probably be a problem that elves could solve, one way or another. But also, this is something for another time, and with that said, I say thank you very much for watching. Be sure to check out my companion video about Frieren, which again is linked in the video description, and as always, have a nice day.